And as I mentioned, our next guest is also a senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee from across the aisle. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Senator Rubio. Senator Rubio, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for having me. I've never spoken to the whole group before. So
it's a big group, right? I mean,
yeah.
It's a sea of faces.
7 years it took that. That's fine. I'm glad to be here.
You've been busy.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator Rubio, you have a strong track record of support for Israel, and you've had that throughout your political career. Where does that passion come from?
Well, three things I think I've always pointed to. The first is I think America should be a friend of our friends, and certainly standing with our allies is important. Israel is the strongest ally we have in the region and one of the strongest in the world. The second is, I think Israel stands for everything we hope the Middle East will become, a free enterprise democracy that's pro-American. If we had more countries like that in the Middle East, our lives would be a little simpler. And then the third is that Israel has a unique purpose, unlike any other nation on earth. It was created for a very specific purpose in the aftermath of the Holocaust, to ensure that there would never again not be a homeland for the Jewish people and an ability to defend themselves when anti-Semitism turns into violence.
I was just talking to Senator Coons about the fact that the two of you together authored that letter last year to the UN Secretary General calling for efforts to root out anti-Israel bias in the UN. The letter was signed by every single one of your colleagues, all 100 senators. And in an era of such partisan politics, what do you think made that kind of bipartisan agreement so possible?
Well, and I always used to joke we couldn't get 100 senators to honor Santa Claus, but we got 100 people on board on Israel. And look, it's a testament to the work of this organization and so many others, and it needs to remain that way. But I would caution you that today's Congress is a reflection of 20 and 30, the work of 20 or 30 years, and you have to forward project 20 years, 15 years from now. The congressional delegations are going to be made up of the men and women, the young men and women that today are in colleges or graduating from universities. So if you want to see the future of this cause, you have to look there. And I'm deeply concerned about what's happening in many American college campuses and the sort of embedded anti-Semitism that we see. And hopefully we need to tackle that.
Well, the Secretary of Defense Mattis said last month that everywhere we find trouble in the Middle East, you always find Iran engaged. And I had a conversation yesterday with Admiral Stavridis. He said the same thing. This should be our top focus in the Middle East. From your perspective, is America doing enough to push back against Iran?
First, we have to understand what they're doing. They're trying to drive us out of the region, and they are doing that through a combination of Shia militias and partnering with different countries. You see them trying to use the Kurdish situation in Iraq to their advantage. You see them reaching out to the Turks. You see them obviously supporting Assad and the work they do with Hezbollah. You see them everywhere in the region. They're taking advantage of the Gulf Rift. So it's a strategic effort on their part to kind of drive the United States out of the region and become the sort of predominant regional power. So every single one of those issues are the ones we have to confront. We cannot be pushed out of the Iraqi conversation. We cannot be pushed out of the Syrian solution and whatever ultimately happens there with stability. We've got it, and then of course it's important for us to make clear to the world that our relationship with Israel is not just symbolic. It doesn't end with the move of an embassy, which we've all supported. It includes the very clear notion that the United States will support Israel militarily, financially, economically, to ensure that they can withstand anything that comes their way, as you see Hezbollah develop these capabilities in Lebanon that are greater than they've ever been in terms of the ability to hit Israel.
And do you think that on Capitol Hill and in the administration there's an understanding of what you just articulated? Are you optimistic about that sort of focus?
I think there's an understanding we want to be supportive of Israel. I think we have some work to do to put together the sort of comprehensive approach that understands that all these issues are interlinked, that Iran's efforts in Iraq are ultimately tied to their ability to encircle and eventually directly threaten Israel, be it through proxies or directly. And I think we need to do more work on that front. We can't just view the Iranian issue in isolation. We have to understand that their ultimate goal is domination of the region, and that includes going right after Israel, even if it's using Hezbollah out of Lebanon, or increasingly Syria. And so we need to kind of tie those things together. They are interrelated.
Well, to some extent, this takes me to the next question. We were just talking, Senator Coons and I, about the new legislation that you've introduced to support not only security assistance to Israel, but expanded U.S.-Israel cooperation in a number of fields. I assume this is why you think this was such a critical effort, right? Because we have to dig in on this support.
And Senator Coons said something, it's the floor, not the ceiling. But it's important that it be there congressionally because administrations come and go. Right. But if it's in the law, and it's for the next 10 years, that means the next administration, whatever party that's in, 6 years from now, whenever that may be, is going to inherit a law that has codified the Memorandum of Understanding as a floor and makes clear to the world that the U.S. has a legal commitment, not just a moral one, but a legal obligation to come to Israel's assistance and to continue to provide help.
And now, Senator Coons said everybody in this room should head to Capitol Hill to show support.
For our bill, that's right. That's what you should do.
What's your view of the prospects? Do you feel good?
They are good, but your work will make it better. Look, there's a lot of issues. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of bills, and sometimes it's just the process of showing up and saying, will you please sign on? Because if we can get 60, 70, 80 co-sponsors, given how tight the floor is in terms of getting bills passed, this is one of those things that we might be able to do without even a vote on it, through that unanimous consent process. And the more co-sponsors we have, and the more of a priority you make it today on the Hill, the higher the prospects are for that. And so hopefully we can get that done. We see a finish line here that's not in the far future, but today is a key day in that direction, and we need your help. So please go do that today.
Now, speaking of other legislation, you've also authored legislation with Senator Shaheen to ratchet up sanctions on Hezbollah. Versions of that legislation have passed both chambers. It sounds as though negotiations are underway on a compromise bill. Can you update us on the status?
So we already did that. This is 2.0. Oh. So we did 1.0 about 3 years ago. Hezbollah, of course, then adjusted. Now we're adjusting. Every time they move, we're going to move to follow them. But I just want to leave you with one thought. The risk that Hezbollah poses out of Lebanon is severe. Their capabilities today and what the Iranians have supplied them with allow them now to manufacture their own rockets and potentially try to overwhelm Israel's defenses at some point. So it is important that we do everything we can to cut off any financial streams that they are using to fund this activity, and that's why 2.0 is so important. So after you talk about Rubio Coons, talk about this one just as well. Although this one is passed, we're just trying to reconcile the differences. I think the prospects are very high that we can get that done.
That's terrific. While the administration has included full funding for security assistance to Israel in its budget request, they continue to seek big cuts in overall international affairs spending. You have been a vocal supporter of robust international affairs spending. Why do you think this kind of funding in general is so important, and how do you make that case to your constituents?
Well, the first thing, everyone to take a deep breath. In the history of the Republic, no Congress has ever just taken the president's budget on this or anything and passed it.
This is true.
We're not going to start now. And number two, on international assistance, I'm all for accountability. I do not want American dollars flowing to countries who then turn around and use it against us or against our values. By the same token, international assistance is less than 1% of our overall budget. It is not charity. It is a direct investment in national security, in strengthening institutions and partner nations, and frankly, it saves us money in the long term if we invest it correctly. So we're going to continue to be vigorous in support of that.
And do you feel that when you try to talk about this to your constituents at home, that they understand that?
A lot of people think foreign aid is like 30, 40% of our budget. When you explain it's less than 1%, and you hold up examples outside of the Middle East, South Korea used to be a foreign aid recipient. Today, they're the 9th or 10th largest economy in the world, and they're a pro-American democracy. Colombia was a failed nation state that today is our strongest ally in South America, all the direct result of U.S. investment, and I think we need to continue to look for opportunities to do that around the world, in addition to continuing to invest in our existing alliances.
And finally, this is just a chance for you to offer some more advice to the room. We've seen a lot of turnover in Congress in recent years, and yesterday a great friend of the U.S.-Israel relationship, Senator Cochran, chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, announced his retirement. What impact does that sort of turnover have on your work, and what advice do you have for APEC on how to build support with new members of Congress?
Well, a lot of members of Congress, if they come from the state level, do not have a deep level of expertise in foreign policy. When I came from the state level, I knew a little bit more about it just because I live in Miami, foreign policy is domestic policy in Miami. But in general, people are chuckling, it really is. But in general, it's not that they don't care about foreign policy, it's just for someone who's been a governor or someone who's been a state senator, it's not an issue that they're aware of. And so one of the things that's most effective about what APEC does is, it isn't someone from halfway across the country that's talking to you. You're all assigned, someone is working with you that's from your community and from your state that actually it has a stake not just in the future of this country and of the world, but also in your community. And those relationships are critical and they're really important. And so I encourage you to continue to do that, especially with new members who I think are going to be inclined to be supportive, but may not be fully aware of all the things that are out there and that are said that are not accurate about the state of affairs in the region or about the differences between the different parties involved in the region. So it really is important early on in a member's career to try to get in front of them and state the case with facts, with figures, with historical data that backs up a strong U.S.-Israel alliance.
I hope you've all been taking notes. Senator Rubio, thank you so much for your time. Let's give him another round of applause. Busy man also. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.